Hokie Hangover. Since last time we talked, Virginia Tech has made coaching changes. They've also made personnel changes in the transfer portal. We're here to talk about it on Sunday night, December 15th, 10 days before Christmas and a little bit before the bowl game. We are live, youtube.com/at Hokie Hangover podcast. And yeah, let's rip it, guys. Virginia Tech, since the last time we spoke, they have fired defensive coordinator Chris Marve. They have fired offensive line coach Ron Crook. They have fired strength and conditioning coach Dwight Galt. And we'll get into transfers later. I am not surprised by any of the three moves they made. In fact, I think these are the right decisions.
Yeah, I think all three of these were at least moderately predictable, especially the Ron Crook decision. I don't think Brent Pry really had any attachment to Ron Crook, considering Crook came in kind of a weird time anyway, and only came in because the whole Joe Rudolph thing did not work out in Blacksburg. The Chris Marv one I thought was a little interesting in the sense of that was Brent Pry's hand-picked guy to groom as a defensive coordinator. And I had a feeling that he was going to try and give Marv a little bit more time to try and figure this out. So moderately surprised with the Marv decision, not at all surprised with Ron Crook. Dwight Galt, kind of surprised in the sense of usually guys really stick with their strength and conditioning guy when they start. I thought he would be a bit more committed to him. All in all, though, I'm not complaining about any of these decisions. I think they're all defensible. The only thing that I would say, guys, is I think that some more decisions could be made here or could have been made. I think they're probably done with the coaching decisions now.
Really?
Yeah, but I definitely think that they could have made a bigger swing at this.
Well, I mean, can't let you say that without elaborating on where you want to see that.
I mean, sure. I mean, I know a lot of folks have kind of, degraded Chris Marv on social media and whatnot, and just about all of it's warranted, guys. But his defense statistically was better than this offense from start to finish. This offense had a entire cadre of receivers. It had a returning starting quarterback. It had an all-conference running back. It had an offensive line that was essentially a second year of starters, guys that had been playing together. And this offense took a major step back for most of the season. And to me, I know that there were parts of the year where it felt like Tyler Bowen really got things going. But you talk about a lack of development from the quarterback position, which is the position he's supposed to be overseeing. You talk about the inconsistencies, the inability to produce with a very upperclassman-laden roster on the offensive end. And I think that would have been an easy place to start. Another spot that I think would be a bit harder for him to make this move, but I think would be defensible, would be safety. I think that's a concern for this team. To be quite honest with you, outside of maybe Fontel Mines and Coach Brooks at running back, I'm not sure that any of these guys have done a great job coaching. We can talk about the field, the recruiting stuff, which I think is a little bit different, but there were certainly opportunities for Brent Pry to take a bigger swing at overhauling his coaching staff.
But did he need to? Right? So
I don't know. I
don't either.
Don't know.
I don't either.
I'm not saying he needed to, but
right.
If we're talking about a program that's stagnant, which is what this program is right now, I can make a case that none of these guys really should be around except for maybe. Yeah. I mean, I think J.C. Price has done a decent job. I like what he did with Antoine Powell-Ryland. I think he was able to get the defensive tackles that have been mostly just kind of Jags to play relatively good football this year with Wilfred Panay and Josh Fuga. And then I really do like what Brooks has done at running back. But again, up and down the team this year, it felt like a bunch of guys at all sorts of positions underwhelmed, and I don't know that we saw the growth necessary for a lot of these coaches to really justify them keeping their jobs. So I think it would have been entirely defensible if Brent Pry said, see ya to two more guys on the staff and really kind of hit the reset button.
Yeah, I get that. I think the answer to my question, like, did he need to? I think we'll find out in the next year or two, right?
Yeah.
What I will commend Pry for is making the change, right? Because that's something that we didn't see Fuente do, right?
Yep.
Fuente didn't fire his friends. We criticized him for it. Big reason why that tenure failed. I don't know if this tenure is going to be successful or fail. I don't know. But I think Pry, by making these moves at the very least, showed that he has a willingness and a want to be successful here, right? And whether or not he is a whole nother conversation. But at least he's making changes that I think, Ricky, to what you just said, are all defensible changes, right? Firing Chris Marv, I think it's as much of an indictment on the lack of development of the linebacker room over the course of 3 years as it is his ability to coordinate a defense. I think he's been able, by and large, to coordinate a defense okay. I mean, Virginia Tech's defense, I thought, played pretty well this year. I think the linebackers over the course of 3 years, if you're looking at it from start to finish, have been pretty awful, right? We came into this year thinking that Sam Brumfield was really going to shore things up at Mike, and he wasn't really able to the point that, like, Jaden Keller was getting reps there for a good portion of the season, especially in the middle part of the ACC schedule.
Yep.
They brought him in to shore up the middle of the defense, and he wasn't able to do it consistently enough, right? To the point where they went back to the guy that they replaced him with in Keller. The linebacker room was not developed well enough over the course of 3 years. I think that's why Chris Marv got fired almost as much as his ability to coordinate a defense, which I think, truthfully, from year 1 to year 3, he really improved upon, right? I think the personnel definitely got better from Pry's first year to Pry's third year. And I think Marv improved from year 1 to year 3. Virginia Tech did not give up the number of explosive plays this year that they gave up last year that were really, really frustrating, that we kind of dismissed in year 1. But also, like, if you look at some of Virginia Tech's really backbreaking losses this year, it could be pointed to the explosive plays defensively and the lack of adjustments made in the second half of games in particular. And I think that's why Marv got let go. Some of that also can be pointed to strength and conditioning, which is a point that we kind of discussed in the middle of the ACC schedule after a couple of the really frustrating losses. It's like, okay, well, I mean, how much of this is strength and conditioning? And it's really hard to make that call from the outside, but it did look like in the second half of some of the games in the ACC schedule that Virginia Tech was really kind of struggling to find the same sort of form they found in the first half of the contest, right? So Pry ultimately makes a decision to let go of Dwight Galt, which I think is a move pretty indicative of what Pry thought of the situation, right? And
Yep.
then if you look at Ron Crook, Ricky, great point. Pry, it wasn't really all that tied to him. I mean, Pry's guy was Joe Rudolph. He left for a better job. It kind of is what it is. Tough part of the coaching cycle, he went ahead and grabbed Ron Crook. Again, journeyman coach, offensive line, very up and down, to put it nicely, right? And I think, you lose, and we'll talk about the transfers in a few minutes, but you lose some of the better players on the offensive line, and either they knew that Crook was getting let go or they just needed to leave regardless, felt like they needed to go. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg there, but I mean, we can read the tea leaves a little bit and say,
Well, at least for Xavier Chaplin, it looks like he just needed to go because he had some money waiting for him at the other
yeah,
end.
for sure. And going to Auburn, I think, is a good move for him. So I don't know.
From what I have been told, in terms of Chaplin, it was literally just we couldn't pay him what he was worth on the open market. Like, and unfortunately for Virginia Tech football, that's going to be a thing going forward in many situations. When you have a a good player, especially in a high value position such as the offensive line. What I hear with Moore is that was like closer to him returning. And then upon him hearing about from Chaplin, what Chaplin was getting calls about, what those numbers looked like, it basically became, I think I'm worth as much as any center in the country, and I want to be compensated as such. And to which the Virginia Tech coaches said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And I mean, perhaps he was right. Looks like he's on visits to like LSU. So.
Okay. Have fun, Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I feel like, and I'm not trying to be that guy, right, that dogs on players that leave. But outside of Xavier Chaplin, and you look at that offensive line and you're like, yeah, that's the guy I want. Who else on that team, who else on the offensive line are you looking at saying, you know what, that's my guy. That's my big addition in the portal.
Chaplin is literally the only guy I would take with eligibility left off the entire Virginia Tech offense.
And guys, it's not like Chaplin went to a big school. Auburn sucks right now. Like they're not that good of a football program at the moment. Yeah. So he went to a mid-level SEC school. He didn't go to an elite program.
A nice addition for a program that just added Jackson Arnold at quarterback, who literally did not have anybody blocking for him the entire season at Oklahoma. Xavier Chaplin automatically becomes the best offensive lineman Jackson Arnold has ever played with at the college level, right? Like by default. So like more power to him. Like Jackson Arnold already with Xavier Chaplin has a better offensive lineman than he played with all of last season. So good for him. Hats off to him. Best of luck.
But anyway, yeah, it's the problem that you see with the offensive line now is like, okay, Chaplin's leaving and Moore's leaving, and it's going to be a big flip. Obviously, new offensive line coach coming in. I do possibly think that it's going to be Brent Davis, whose Army contract is running up, so it is worth it for him to get a regular on-field coaching position again. It's not just subtracting from the Army paycheck there, which is interesting because that was the in-house guy, but that's just what a lot of the tea leaves are kind of leaning towards right now. But yeah, new offensive line coach, pretty much new group. And like as of now, does it look like we're chalking Bob Schicken to play again next year? Yeah, it does, which is not totally encouraging if you are a Virginia Tech football fan. But that's where the recruiting stuff does come into play, and roster management's obviously going to be a big focus, and coaches are having to approach this in a totally different way that would be foreign to the way that rosters were managed, just like 4 years ago or something like that, right? So that's interesting. But with knowing that and knowing that you should have some guys poached, year in, year out, the emphasis on recruiting and development is going to be huge. And recruiting, though, Ricky, you had an article where you aptly pointed out recruiting has improved. That is true, but not necessarily along the offensive line. Not with this class, not with the class prior. And, you have bigger names like, and who knows what happened there, but Gunnar Gibbons also heading for the exits. You have Lance Williams, which was one of the recruits in 2 years ago's class, who you might think would be potentially slated for a starting role. But of course, and this is about as obvious as it gets, but when we saw the way that the offensive line struggled this year, and there was little to no changing of it, bringing in the backup type of thing. What would that imply about the backups' talent and readiness at the present time? Doesn't speak well to it, right? So, if you're Virginia Tech, looking ahead at next season, that's automatically becomes your number A1 concern, among quite a few other concerns that we'll review over the course of the next 9 or so months.
Yeah.
But To what, to Mike, your question, like, did he need to fire more people? Like, yeah, we'll find out. But like, evidently, he didn't think he did.
Right.
This is a guy in Brent Pry who, your name is now on that coacheshotseat.com list, sitting there at number 10. Like, you know it. I know it. Everyone in the stands next year is going to know it. The coaches across the field are going to know it. He's got to win to keep his job.
Yeah.
And yes, you said it looks like he cares. I have no doubt that he cares. That his, effort and enthusiasm has never been a problem with this guy.
Yeah.
But he is coaching for his, life right now, effectively. And you're going to make the changes that you feel are necessary to preserve your own employment. And he made those changes as he saw fit. Was he forced to? I don't know. You kind of would hope that he wasn't. You would hope that that this was a stretch of leadership more so than anything else, and not like Witt or the donors holding his feet to the fire. But yeah,
I actually would,
evidently that's what he thought he needed to do.
I would actually kind of hope that Witt pulled him into the office and said, "Look, clearly you need to make some changes. I'm not going to tell you what changes you need to make, but this isn't working. And if you want to keep your job, and if I want to keep my job,
Well, yeah.
shit's got to change. So get in the room and figure it out." I would actually kind of hope that Witt made that call and kind of nudged him towards the side of take a swing at this and see if you can find some better folks that can get this righted.
Witt also is in a position this time around, Ricky, which builds on your point and the point Andrew just made. Witt is also in a position this time around where he kind of has to make Pry do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can hire a second head football coach. You can't hire a third if you're serious about it. We've talked about that a million
Some would
times.
say
here.
you can't hire a second, but that's not.
And some would say you can't hire a second, right? Like, he has swung and missed 1.5 times, and whether or not we make it to 2 remains to be seen. But like, he's at least swung and missed 1.5 times. His tenure has been, I don't want to call it an outright disaster. He's made 2 bowl games in 3 years, but it hasn't been an outright improvement from the last guy out of like recruiting a little bit better, right? So like, okay. And
Recruiting better and the results are the same.
Let's be clear. Like, Brent Pry's best season is the exact season that Justin Fuente got fired for.
Right? And we've made that clear too. And by the way, like, not only do you not have ties to Ron Crook, but as you guys both pointed out, Ricky, both you on the recruiting podcast with Matei, which, by the way, thank you everybody for listening to that. That podcast exploded. We really appreciate it. People eat up recruiting. And Matei was fantastic, of course. We mentioned it on the podcast, and he's been great anyway, just a supporter of the show. But we were really excited to have him on, and he was fantastic. But thank you all for listening to that. But Matei mentioned it. It has not been a strong suit of Pry recruiting the offensive line, right? It hasn't been. And Andrew, like you said, they didn't really turn to any backups this year. So what does that tell you about the state of the offensive line in general, which I think, again, we talk about Marv not developing linebackers, and let's talk about Crook now not necessarily recruiting the talent that's necessary at offensive line, also not developing them. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing here exactly, right? So now Pry's going to take a swing at hiring whoever on the offensive line. We'll see if it's an improvement. Recruiting needs to improve there.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the teams that have struggled, like in the middle of, I'm just thinking like programs that have struggled in the middle of tenures that have kind of gotten it turned around. Like, we'll see with Napier at Florida, but I think the big improvement for Mullen, at least on the recruiting trail, is what they've done on the offensive line. It looks like they've finally hit on a quarterback, right? They've improved in the trenches. Notre Dame, in the middle of Brian Kelly's tenure, they improved in the trenches to the point now where, like, they're one of the best teams in the country on both sides of the ball in the trenches, something we couldn't say a decade ago when they were competing for, we'll call it competing for national titles. They made it to a national title game back in 2012, and they got run off the field because they literally did not have the dudes up front. That has changed, right? And now it's kind of gone to the next level under Freeman. The best teams in the country that kind of figure it out, that have gone through these struggles, they figure it out in the trenches. By no means is Virginia Tech one of the best programs in the country, but I think if you want to improve even in regard to the ACC and you're standing in it, you've got to figure out how to get better on the offensive line. And for Bayshall Tootin to have as good of a year as he's had the last 2 years, even this year, like being as hurt as he was, and when he was healthy, he still figured out a way to perform in spite of the offensive line play at times, is pretty outstanding, like astonishing to some degree, considering the guys we haven't seen develop up front. It's a bummer they can't pay Xavier Chaplin. It's a feather in Ron Crook's cap that Xavier Chaplin is as good as he is and is getting the money that he's getting from Auburn. But also, there are some guys there in the interior offensive line that I don't think have improved a ton. And if you think Braylon Moore is worth the money that he's getting, like I said, more power to you. Best of luck in all your future endeavors, Brian Kelly. I certainly would not be paying him the amount of money that you're potentially paying him here.
Yeah, some like rich, like Louisiana dude gonna come to the conclusion midway through next year, like this is what I'm paying for. But I mean, who knows? Maybe under LSU's offensive line coach, whom I don't know who that is, up the top of my noggin, he takes a big step forward. but yeah, I would. It's just. But again, that just goes to show, in a world where offensive linemen are at a premium in the portal. Even a guy who's been like, at best, good sometimes, commands a lot. So
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of.
It's almost like average play on the offensive line at the collegiate level is like not quite elite, but it's close.
Yeah, I mean you're as strong as your weakest link, and he's clearly formidable. Like he was a starter somewhere. Wasn't the main cause of people's ire throughout the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean ultimately though, beyond those couple of guys across the offensive line, do any of the other big transfer exits surprise you? I mean, I for one, would look at Mose Phillips there and say, I guess that's a money thing. I don't know what the exact number that he was looking for is, but again, I mean, it's until this, for lack of a better term, shit show is changed with some formalized rules and regulations. These are decisions the coaches are going to have to make, and players are going to occasionally enter the portal, whether they're Xavier Chaplin and command a lot of money because they're good, or other players who command a lot of money because of the position and the situation that they're in. And some guys are going to take a risk and they're going to get, I'm not saying Mose Phillips is necessarily going to get burned for it, but you haven't seen like a crazy out of this world offer list for the guy and schools come and call in, every 5 seconds. Not to say he was a bad player, but he wasn't a great player.
He's the one I'm most surprised about. I was surprised by Chaplin, but not shocked, just because I thought Crook might get let go, and I didn't know what kind of impact that would have. So I was now hearing that that's more of a money thing. That's not shocking to me. I was surprised by Mose Phillips, right? That's one I was legitimately surprised about. People were surprised about Delane. I didn't get that. Why were people surprised about that? I thought he was either going to the draft or he would leave. I didn't think there was any shot he was coming back. So that one did not surprise me at all when he decided that he was going to enter the transfer portal instead of turning pro. Young team next year. This is like the prime example of a guy who I thought would maybe go elsewhere and try to improve his draft stock if he wasn't going to outright turn pro. I thought he was in that category. I thought Drones was in that category, which we can talk about quarterback here in a second. But I was not shocked by that at all. I think Phillips is the most surprising one. Everyone else, I'm just like, okay, that's fine. Like even more, I'm like, all right, that's fine. Okay. not a huge surprise, right? And this was a veteran-laden roster, so it wasn't like there were a lot of guys you look at that even had an opportunity to return that were going to be significant contributors next season, right? They're really the list wasn't that long, so the guys who left, you really had to kind of handpick, be like, yeah, that's a surprising one. I think Chaplin a little bit surprised, not shocked. Mose Phillips like legitimately surprised that he's transferring.
Yeah, especially since we saw that Pearson Prelo was not being removed from this staff, because I think that was kind of a rumor floating around that Virginia Tech might make a move at safety, given the inconsistencies of the guys at that position and maybe some lack of development from some folks there. But Phillips' decision to leave is odd, considering he essentially had a guaranteed starting job lined up for next season. I don't know what he's going to make on the open market, but I can't imagine that it's going to be a ton more, if any more, than what he was getting at Virginia Tech. If a team gets desperate, maybe they overpay for him. But anyone that puts on the film for Mose Phillips is going to see the same stuff that we saw all year, which is a very inconsistent safety and coverage.
Is he gone for sure, Andrew? Do you know? Do you have any reading of that?
I have no idea if like the door is still open for him or anything like that. Obviously, if you've seen, and I honestly can't rattle all these names off the top of my head because there's so many, but like with the official visitors and the guys that they're targeting in the portal, the safety position is at a premium there. So they're obviously looking to replace him. But yeah, I don't know if the door is still open in the way that like if Xavier Chaplin had wanted to come back, they would have been like, "Come on down, buddy." Like,
yeah, really.
A little different. Stroman's transfer didn't surprise me. Hasn't been healthy. Would love to have him back. Like if he was healthy, he's a good player. You just can't rely on him because he's never healthy, right? That's the bottom line. I mean, he just has not been healthy enough. Flat out.
when he is healthy, he's getting kicked out of games for targeting.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
A Jalen Stroman tradition.
Yeah, he's hitting guys too hard, which I can only get so mad about. Okay, so guys are transferring, guys are coming in. There are also guys who are transferring out of the program I legitimately have never heard of in my entire life, so best of luck to those guys. I'm seeing those floating around social media. I'm like, this guy was on the team? Who is this?
Yeah, people need to realize, which a lot of fans just don't seem to grasp the concept of, like, this transfer portal thing is a two-way street. Like, people are being told to leave. Like, hey, man, you're not it. Not here.
So Dwight Vick, friend of the show, tweeted that earlier today, and I just saw it a few minutes before we hit record. Chance Fitzgerald's transferring. He hasn't played really at all. He's been buried on the depth chart receiver. Maybe that was one of those situations. I have no idea. But they're also like guys who I legitimately have never heard of in my entire life. We get pretty deep into the rosters, right? And we're talking like probably preferred walk-ons, barely getting scholarships that were announcing transfers. I was like, you could literally like,
Mike, you're telling me you're not like in tune with Jackson Sigler?
Who? They could be creative players on NCAA 25, right? They could be like legitimate creative players, and you could throw their name on there with like one of those like fancy edited letters saying they were transferring as like a joke, as like a parody thing. And I would legitimately like not know the difference. No offense to those people, but best of luck. Hope you land at the Group of 5 level, FCS. Hope you continue your careers onward and upward. No idea who they are. Don't mean to be a dick. No idea who they are.
Mike went from noted Thomas Castellanos hater to noted Ishmael Findlater hater.
Know that name. But
yeah, just give it,
I do know that
name. Out here, Michael.
I do know that name. I mean this is now we're a half hour in, and we've kind of we've run those main portal departures to ground.
Yeah.
The big news here is that Virginia Tech is keeping both Kyron Drones and Pop Watson. Okay. Good with it. This would be the first time if Kyron Drones takes first team snaps next year, which I have no reason to think he won't. If he takes first team snaps next year, it will be the first time that Virginia Tech has had a starting quarterback take snaps in 3 consecutive seasons since Logan Thomas in 2011 to 2013. So it's been a while since Virginia Tech's had stability in the quarterback room year over year for 3 straight seasons, and that's what we're staring in the face heading into 25, which I'm good with.
Yeah, and to be clear on this one, right? Like it's an interesting situation insofar as I think if you asked Kyron Drones before the season, are you going to be playing for Virginia Tech next year? You'd have said nope. Probably going to be in the NFL. And if not, I'll be playing for, like, an SEC or Big Ten school, getting the bag. But like, here's the realities on the ground, and obviously you hope for improvement down the line. But Kyron Jones did not have the season that he had last year. This season, you can say if you want to be, defending him, that was at least somewhat in part due to the fact that he's injured, or he was injured at multiple points throughout the season. But that is also a reality on the ground. That Kyron Jones is coming off an injury. He is, in that sense, damaged goods. And you could imagine that Virginia Tech, working with the same coordinators for, in a season where stability is going to be, few and far between at most of these position groups. They would certainly appreciate the opportunity to have a quarterback who's at least pretty talented, Kyron Jones, come back. So, yeah, I mean, in that sense, like, he commanded more from Virginia Tech, likely than he would have anywhere else. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not against him coming back. As for Pop Watson, I mean, I said this on the show, so I'll raise my hand. I'll say I was wrong. I'm not afraid to do that. That I didn't think there was much of a chance that either of those guys were going to go. That they would both come back, and I was wrong. Evidently, some sort of NIL deal was worked out. Obviously, these are guys that brought Pop on, throughout that recruiting process, and he has good relationships with them. And maybe I don't know how it was pitched. If it was pitched as him competing for the starting job, if it was pitched as him, remaining as that quarterback in waiting for 2026, I would assume it would be probably the former than the latter. But again, reality is that Pop's played one game. He played quite well. Or he started one game. He played quite well in the game that he started. As I mentioned on the podcast, to recap that game, it was as good, if not better, than any game that Kyron Jones had all year. But it was one game. And it was against UVA. And he's a 5'9" quarterback with not a lot of tape. So it would have been a riskier move for him to throw yourself out in the portal, not necessarily knowing whether you're going to land in a better situation than the one that you're currently in. So it's nice that in what was otherwise a pretty negative news cycle for Virginia Tech, as the portal opened up, that they got to have at least one win in terms of retention, though it obviously, it feels a lot different than last season, when everyone's returning.
Yeah, I think for me, the way I look at it is I'm not sure that Virginia Tech would have been able to add a better quarterback in the portal than Kyron Drones. Given the makeup of this roster, given the uncertainty surrounding the program long term, I just don't know that Virginia Tech would have been able to afford that kind of guy. And because of that, it made a lot of sense, and for other reasons as well. It made a lot of sense for Pry to try and keep both of these guys and to pitch them the ability to start in the future, but to pitch them that this is probably going to be a competition. And I do have a feeling, guys, that in spring practice, this is going to be an open competition. Kyron was named the starter pretty early for this year, and it was kind of assumed he was QB1 all along. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I certainly think that he could win that job pretty early, depending on how practice goes. But I would assume that Pop was told you're going to have a chance to earn the starting job next year. And for Pop Watson, I think Andrew, you kind of nailed it in the sense of what other options is he going to have to compete and start at the power four level rather than having to go play for, you know, Kent State or Akron or something like that. No shade to the MAC. Um, for me, that this is probably the best case scenario for Virginia Tech at the quarterback position. I certainly did not expect them to do this, to be able to retain both of those guys. I would love to know how much money they now have tied up in both of these players. But long term, this is much better for the program. And if Brent Pry is able to have a solid season next year, Kyron goes on his way after a year of starting, and you're able to have Pop Watson start in 2026, that would probably be really ideal given the stability that you would have had in the room for the last 3 seasons. Given how volatile things are, that's probably not what's going to happen. But all things considered, this was a good win for Virginia Tech. And as you guys mentioned, that a lot of bad narratives surrounding the program after, a few starters decide to look elsewhere. So being able to retain both of these players is a plus.
Trying to figure out what would be more risky: Pop Watson jumping in the portal, trying to find a better situation, or Brent Pry going into next season with just Pop Watson as your starting quarterback with like 7 quarters of data on him, like in game. I think this is pretty good overall for Virginia Tech to retain drones for all the reasons you guys mentioned. Also, in addition to that, Pry did not have the luxury. Even if he wants to move to Pop Watson, he didn't have the luxury, right? The fan base would have loved it until Pop Watson goes out and doesn't play well, and in the first couple of games next year, and you have nobody to turn to, right? It sounds great on paper because he looked really good against UVA and looked okay against Duke, jumping into a tough situation as the backup quarterback after being really, in reality, a third string quarterback all season long, right?
Yeah.
Tough situation to be in. I thought he played pretty well. He had the one ugly turnover, but by and large, right? How much of that you putting on Pop Watson after being the third stringer all season, right? Thought he played pretty well against Duke. Would have been pretty risky for Pry. He doesn't have the luxury to just put all of his eggs in the Pop Watson basket, despite Pop looking really, really good against UVA. Just doesn't have the luxury to do it. If Virginia Tech went 9-3 this year and like barely missed the playoff and like was in contention for the conference title like we were hoping they would be at the outset of the season, yeah, like drones would be gone. You could have the youth movement, right? You could go into next season playing a bunch of the young guys that are developing and that you've recruited that have played well, and you have that goodwill. But you don't have that anymore because the team that you retained from last year that was supposed to be pretty good this year ended up laying an egg. So now you're going into a year 4 that's really important for a lot of different parties, Pry and the staff and the athletic director, etc.
The leash is a lot tighter going
a
into
lot
next
tighter.
year.
a lot tighter, with unless Pry pulls a rabbit out of the hat in the transfer portal, a roster it's going to be a lot worse. Like, it's going to have to be his best year of coaching next year, by the way, with at least 3 new staff members.
Yep.
And it's going to have to be a lot better. It's going to have to be his best year of coaching and development out of the 3 years prior. And we'll see, right? Drones isn't stepping into a perfect situation. Say he is the starting quarterback next year. He's not stepping into a perfect situation. Your all conference running back is going to be gone. Your senior laden receiving room is going to be gone. As far as we know, Benchy Gosnell is going to be back. You're losing at least 2 of your offensive linemen. Maybe that's good, maybe that's not. I mean, we can argue about that later on, I guess, depending on who they bring in and what that looks like. But I don't know if that's necessarily going to be better. I just think you had to do this just for the sake of having some continuity, right? And I think continuity is good in the quarterback room. I also think we're going to learn, even with a worse roster next year, I think we're going to find out how much of Kyron Drones' regression this year was him being banged up versus how much of this was him just being bad, right? And just like actually taking a step back. I think Virginia Tech's willingness to keep him and you know, the lengths that they went to keep him on the roster probably indicates that, yeah, maybe he regressed a little bit, but he was also pretty hurt, which by the end of the year, we knew he was really hurt. It's really the question of how banged up was he in the earlier parts of the season when he was starting every week, but then wasn't playing as well as we've seen him play before, missing open guys, that sort of thing. If it was a knee thing all year long, maybe that's just the reality of it, right? Maybe just was not healthy. We'll find out. But I think retaining him is ultimately a good thing. I just don't know at the end of the day, and I agree with you guys about what you said about Pop and whether or not, you know, he's going to get a chance at the starting job, all that stuff. I agree. Virginia Tech's in a spot where they're in a much better spot right now than they were in year 2, where Pry made the move to Kyron Drones. Started the year at Grant Wells, moved to Kyron Drones. Worst thing that happens by keeping both of them is you make a move away from Drones and go to Pop Watson, right? That's the worst thing that can happen.
And he doesn't pan out.
And he doesn't, well, yeah, and he doesn't pan out. Okay, now you have neither guy playing well, then you're probably losing your job anyway. You're probably losing your job anyway, right?
Yep.
So I think just go with this, have the stability in the quarterback room, figure everything else out as you go, and hope some of these younger guys that have played some snaps and haven't gotten the opportunity to play like 4 quarters of football every week, hope that some of those guys continue to play well in a bigger role. But I don't know, man. Offensive line's a major concern, and they got to figure that out before anything else.
Hell, I'm not even sure who's going to be starting in the bowl game.
Oh, speaking of which, I'm upgraded to probable for the bowl game.
Ooh, hello.
Let's go.
I'm upgraded to probable.
Scott, that's breaking news.
Producer Scott, my brother-in-law, was asked by my wife what he wanted for Christmas, and he said he wanted to go to the bowl game with me. So shout out to Scott. So my wife said no problem. So I am very high likelihood I am going to be in Charlotte for the bowl game.
Well, that is excellent, and we will be having a little tailgate soiree at my place before the game, which you and Scott and the wives and any other involved parties are more than welcome to join.
Run it back, baby. Run it back. Ricky.
I'm questionable. Still working on it. Still working on it.
Nope, no pressure, but if I can make it to Charlotte, I haven't made it to Blacksburg in 3 years, but if I can make it to Charlotte.
Okay, it's 10:53, so the kids are asleep. Fuck you, buddy. Like I've been to more Tech games over the last 2 years than you've probably been to in a decade. I don't want to hear it.
It's 10:53 p.m., so the kids are asleep. Excellent preface, and agree. Nod to you. That's a point. That's a point to you. That is we'll mark an X in your column on that one. A decade is probably too long of a time frame, just because I was going to a lot of games right after college. But the last 5 years, you're right.
Mike
no
used
questions,
to have,
Your Honor.
Damn near perfect attendance, and it just fell off to absolutely zero attendance at all whatsoever.
Yeah, so I was in a similar boat. So after I left Blacksburg and after the 2017 season, I didn't go back to a game until 2021, 2.
Yeah.
I think it was 2. So.
Yeah. Well, neither of you guys can even hold a candle to me.
Yeah.
I go to the mall, baby.
You do.
Andrew's been going strong for a while now.
You do. You do go to the mall.
I think I've missed probably 4 games in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the team has been mostly cheeks.
Mostly cheeks. Mostly very bad. Yeah. Mostly very bad.
What a shame.
It's got to be. Because the games I tend to miss are the UVA games. The team has got to have a losing record with me in attendance.
Well, it's certainly not your fault, Andrew. We know that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's certainly not your fault.
Yeah, I mean, Pry can fire whoever he wants, but until he gets Andrew out of the stands of Lane Stadium, he's totally screwed. The outlook's
But
not very
I'll tell
good.
you
He
what,
is toast.
a lot of the games, they have successfully gotten me out of the stands during the game.
Well, at least Andrew's not like belligerently berating the athletic director, unlike one of our friends.
That's true. That's true. He sending us the pictures of the 12 or 13 beers he deleted during the telecast. Shout out Grayson. Not to put him on blast, but shout out
I don't
Grayson.
think he's hiding from that.
He's absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Grayson, this man sent us a photo the morning after.
That was Duke, right? The morning after Duke?
And he looked like he had been run over by a bulldozer.
It was two back to back. It was a picture of him, and then it was a picture of the empty beer can. Like, oh, okay, one of those nights. Yeah.
Sometimes it's the only route you can take there.
Oh.
It's like the
My man
profits
had
on the
a-
field hasn't been great, but liquor sales in Blacksburg has been going strong.
My man had a real Hokie hangover that night. It was a real Hokie hangover.
Named the podcast after him. Didn't even know it. Oh. Well,
But no, I'm very glad to hear that you're coming, Mike.
yeah,
We're just
I'll be there.
declaring it now. We're declaring.
I'll be there.
You're
Yeah,
gonna
I'll be there.
The line for Mike being at the game is moved to like minus 550.
Yeah, from like plus 2,300. So I mean, it's been quite the swing. Sharps have been on me going to the game. I'll say
If
that.
you got
They've
the
been
early
hammering that.
ticket, you were making some hefty coin on this one.
I saw people making a bunch of money off Travis Hunter winning the Heisman Trophy, and it was that kind of move. It was like going from like plus 1,200 to like minus whatever it was before they took him off the board.
I'm
it was that kind of move.
I'm gonna throw this out there. Sorry, Ashton, you were robbed. So that's all I can say.
Yeah,
He
I
said
don't
as
know
much
if he,
himself after the announcement.
yeah, I don't know if he was robbed, but like I think there was a fine argument that I am not going to dispute for him winning the Heisman Trophy. I mean, it was
All
one
I'm
of those
gonna
years
say
which we
is-
don't see very often.
All I'm gonna say is the Maxwell is essentially the same award. And,
It is.
And
Same prestige.
Ashton won that one.
Right,
And
he did.
if you look at the voting base for the Maxwell versus the Heisman, they're very different.
Everybody gets a
And you
Heisman
can-
vote,
and
which
you
is
can-
I don't get it. They'll give the Heisman vote to anybody.
The
Who's in
better
charge
thing-
of that?
The better thing about the Heisman vote is how did anyone leave off Hunter or Genty off their Heisman ballots, which some people did.
No, so first of all, that is totally indefensible. I was about to bring up people voting Hunter third. This was a 2-horse race, baby. It was either Genty or Hunter. If you voted Hunter anything worse than second, you should not get a vote anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong with people?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I mean, it is tough because there's obviously compelling arguments that can be made for both sides. But yes,
Right.
tough on Genty when you have a Heisman Trophy caliber season that would win it for you in most years. But you know, the Hunter kid is special. Like, it's tough, and to the
Yeah.
extent that like Colorado having outsized media coverage and attention in a
Certainly
world
helps.
where, like you mentioned, everyone gets a Heisman vote, and
Yeah.
there's just no way that like, everyone watching this is like seeing every Boise State game. Like, come on, there's no way.
Yeah.
So, I think that perhaps the Deion Sanders brand and stuff might have carried him to an extent in what was a very close race. But I mean, he's obviously worthy, and you know, we can. It's not really our topic, but people will debate for the next 4 or so months whether he's worthy of a top overall pick in an NFL draft, where it seems like the quarterback position is weaker than in a couple of the past years.
I will say it was cool that Deion. Well, obviously Deion was Eric Cease's coach, but it was cool that Deion and Shedeur were there. What was more surprising to me is that Gus Johnson and Mark Jones from ESPN weren't also sitting there in the front row. Because if you've ever listened to them call a Colorado game, it's like they got to change their pants at halftime. They're so excited about it. calling Dion Coach Prime and, exploding every time, Colorado scores a touchdown. It's like very weird. So I'm surprised they weren't in the front row last night, but Lil Wayne made the cut. So very weird. I'm surprised by that. Surprised. Hopefully neither one of them got a Heisman vote, but whatever.
Wouldn't be surprised.
I'm going to hear about that from somebody, aren't I? Whatever.
Probably.
We'll leave it in. Whatever.
Sometimes you just have to take a stand, Michael.
Mark Jones would have left it in. How do we feel? How do we feel about? We'll do a bowl game preview. How do we feel about who is going to suit up for the bowl game? Because we're gonna be. I made jokes about the guys hitting the portal, and I had no idea who they were. Some of those guys are going to be playing in the bowl game, I think, because I don't know who Virginia Tech's even going to field on this roster on January 3rd. No idea.
Yeah. I mean, we know who the starting quarterback is, right? It's probably going to be Pop Watson.
Right.
At running back, I guess it's Coney is your starter there.
Tootin hasn't officially said anything yet, has he?
No, Price said all the players who said that they're declaring for the draft aren't playing in the bowl game.
Well, was he one of the ones that said he was declaring, like, even though he's out of eligibility and can't play anymore?
Yes, I believe he was.
Okay. Well, regardless, at wide receiver, really not sure how many of those guys are actually going to play. Offensive line, huge question. Defensive line, huge question. Linebacker, question. Cornerback, bigger question. Safety, maybe one of the biggest questions. I mean, there's a ton of openings in the 2 deep for this game, especially on the back end of that 2 deep. You're going to have a lot of guys who have either played sparingly this year or have not played at all. They're going to be in backup roles or contributor roles for the bowl game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, and I guess one thing that you kind of look forward to is you're going to see, a lot more Aiden Green. I would assume you're going to see probably more Brody Adams than we've ever seen at wide receiver. We'll probably get a swan song game from Gosnell. He seems like the kind of guy that would enjoy the opportunity to play in his last college game. Obviously, Benji Gosnell going to be a big piece of that. But in that sense, like, it'll be a big, it'll be something of a preview of what we're going to be looking at next year, except for, maybe Pop at quarterback rather than Jones. But, from a offensive standpoint, that's what we're looking at. Defensively, just laden with question marks.
Yeah.
So am I encouraged by all of this? Absolutely not. Do I think that Virginia Tech's going to win the game? My gut tells me no because of all the guys that aren't playing, but I haven't taken the follow who's playing for Minnesota. First of all, I got to figure out who's good on Minnesota. Step 2, figure out if they're actually participating in this football game, which, not to go into old man off my lawn mode or whatever, but so a bit sad. Bowl games used to mean something. Big part of my childhood. Would get super excited about it. As you guys know, I grew up a Wisconsin fan, and I would be like, oh my gosh, Wisconsin's playing Miami in the Camping World Bowl, and this is going to be awesome. And, it was, now it's like Virginia Tech gets pushed into a better bowl than they're otherwise qualified to be in, and participating in it. So
trying to figure out which one of you has more teams that you root for.
Andrew, definitely.
Andrew's got Wisconsin, Rutgers, Duke, Virginia Tech.
Andrew, by far.
A lot of college football teams. I can like a couple.
Formerly a Middle Tennessee State superfan.
Now
not anymore.
They betrayed me.
They betrayed you.
And then Mike's got the freaking Notre Dame stuff in his room.
Yep.
That is
Virginia Tech and Notre Dame. That's it.
Again, all of my. Oh, I'm also an Arizona State fan now. My cousin goes there, so that's my horse in this playoff.
Jesus.
You're single. I can get why you're an Arizona State fan. Yeah. He's gonna be taking some trips out to Tempe before we know it.
I was out there in February, my friend.
Scouting. Advanced scouting.
But
Bring Belichick along for the ride. Noted ACC coach Bill Belichick since we last
that's
recorded,
what
by
this
the way.
country needs. Like a reality show about me going on a cross-country road trip to Arizona State with Bill Belichick. I should write my
ever
own
do,
400-page manifesto.
If we ever get a
that'd be high
videographer,
quality television.
yeah, Izzy's been doing photo for us. If she ever starts doing video and just follows you around Arizona State, that would be what the people want. You'd have to scroll down quite a bit on our YouTube page for that one. I think we'd have to bury that somewhere.
I think we'd have to create another channel.
My 22-year-old beautiful women.
Oh man.
Oh God.
All
Michael
right,
Turner
San
says
Diego.
we'll get eaten. Just to go through some of these comments here while we're still on. James Gilmore points out that drones can be pointed to as a recruiting piece for transfers, important pitch to all positions, that the most important position on the field is solidified. I think that's a good point. Michael Turner says we'll get eaten alive at LSU. I assume he is referring to Caden Moore, to which I say, I'm not rooting for that to happen, but if I had to bet on it,
Probably so.
probably agree with you.
Probably so. Yeah, probably so. I mean, even if he blocks well, Nussmeier will throw it to the wrong team. I have never been more wrong about a point than I was about Nussmeier being QB1 in the 2025 NFL Draft, which is what he looked like through like the halfway point in October, and then he looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC for the rest of the season. So I'd like to renege on that. I'd like to do over there, mulligan, if you will.
Is
Yeah,
it?
the show is all about accountability. We admit when we're wrong. Not every
That's what I am.
podcast will give that
I'm
to
being
you.
accountable.
Is it-
everybody's got bad takes. That was one of mine. I'm accountable. Hand up.
Is it
my
that
bad. I'll
take,
be better.
Mike, or is it the one where you said that Cal had a shot of going to Charlotte?
In my defense, they were 3-0. Okay, they were 3-0. Great defense, playing okay offense against bad competition.
They went
look,
like 2-6 in the ACC.
how many one-score games they lose? It was Brent Pry West.
Oh God!
How many one-score games they lose?
You relying on the one-score game trope is ironic and
Justin
rich
Wilcox.
there, Michael.
Justin Wilcox, Brent Pry West, Scott Frost West, whatever you want to call it. That's what he was. And he hired noted offensive mind Brian Harsin to be his new offensive coordinator, which will go over swimmingly considering his political views. That will be something. Hopefully he just coaches ball and then stays out of the press.
Didn't they also hire Nick Rolovich?
They did. I
Which,
mean, just
another guy that
Wilcox,
doesn't really fit at Berkeley.
Wilcox simply does not. Wilcox does not care. Ball coaches. That's what he wants. You know,
Hey,
a good fit.
I respect it. I
do
it.
too. I
Although
do too.
they did push Mendoza out, apparently.
I don't know if they pushed him out or he pushed himself out. He's going 98 yards with his boys at some MAC school, probably. Good for him.
Hey,
Best of luck in Northern Illinois.
if Virginia Tech needed a quarterback, he could go 98 yards in Blacksburg. I'd be fine with that.
He would. I mean, with the state of the Virginia Tech quarterback room, if the quarterbacks play like they did this year, Mendoza would be in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to while we're talking about the portal and drones and all that stuff, but Ricky, I think you mentioned like you don't know if you could get a better quarterback than Kyron Jones in the portal. True. Well, the number one quarterback in the portal, Darian Mensah of Tulane, headed to play for Manny Diaz and Duke. So that was there was one that surprised me. Again, the guy ESPN rating the number one player overall in the portal, choosing Duke football. That's certainly something.
I mean,
They pushed out Murphy.
well, yeah, I think that's pretty obvious now that
They
we know
pushed
that
out Murphy.
they got
Yeah.
Mensa.
Yeah, they pushed out Murphy. That's what happened there.
Yeah, so I would say, where's Murphy going to end up?
Tulane. Sorry.
Oh, well, quarterback swap. Yeah, that never hurt anybody. A little signal caller swap. Let's see how that works out.
I mean, just wait. We're going to be doing trades probably in 5 years for college football.
I mean, Belichick lives for this shit. That's why. So he was like, "I'm getting
That's why
into
he
this.
came back.
We're gonna be trading. We got free agency. Let's."
We got every year.
Mike
free
Lombardi is my
agency of every
GM.
Player. Perfect.
Yeah, this is perfect. This is why I came here for. Can I do a trade of my girlfriend?
I was gonna say, and he's got like 22-year-olds outside his office all day long.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say, yeah. Let me take my young partner, and let's see what they're paying the sorority girls nowadays. Yeah, in the age of NIL. That's what
and
he's-
on that note,
before we get canceled,
we
do
should
you guys have
probably
anything
end this
else?
show.
Do you guys have anything else?
No, we'll be back for a Duke's Mayo Bowl preview. Although I will say, a great way to end the season, guys, would be Brent Pry drenched in Duke's Mayo. I'm here for that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be back. Obviously, it's not just going to be losing transfers. It's going to be some new folks coming in the door too. At least you freaking hope so. So once that solidifies, plus obviously hiring a replacement defensive coordinator, offensive line coach, and strength coach, the news cycle does not stop. So we'll be all over it. And looking forward to seeing definitely Mike and possibly Ricky at the bowl game in a few weeks. So I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Christmas with your families. And then get ready, because on the third day of 2025, on January 1st, you turn a new leaf. Mike, it'll be just like old times on January 3rd. So we're going to be back to trying to ruin your life a little bit.
That's good. I'm looking forward to it. That's hasn't happened to me in a while. So.
Oh, and one more thing I wanted to mention, not Virginia Tech related, but shout out to Blacksburg native Lanto Griffin.
Yes.
Won the PGA Tour's
card
school today.
Got his card.
Got his card back. So Lanto
He's returning.
Griffin, yes, who learned to play golf at the Hill in Blacksburg, which I'm sure is a course that is
Yeah.
quite familiar to many of our listeners, and myself. I know
Paul.
these guys certainly included.
Paul Van Wagner. Shout out
Yes,
Paul Van
Paul.
Wagner.
Shout out to Paul Van Wagner, who famously ended the club championship last.
Yes.
Love you, Paul. Sorry, but
It's done an ad
But,
read or two for them.
yeah, no. But so shout out to Lanto, VCU guy, which I always found to be a little bit strange, but back on tour. So Blacksburg, Virginia, well
Good for him.
represented.
Good for him. If we have any major coaching news or transfer portal news between now and the bowl game, we will record again prior to the preview. Otherwise, we'll catch up on everything in the preview. I think it's safe to say in the next week or two. Obviously, holidays coming up, etc. But
Yeah, by the way, neither of you mentioned Virginia Tech narrowly escapes Navy in basketball today.
win number 5.
So big weekend for Navy sports.
Hang the banner.
I had a friend of mine text our group chat, and he said, "Hey, we didn't lose today," and I immediately said back, "I don't care."
In what sport?
I
In
don't
what
care.
sports did we not lose today? Okay, well, good enough. Better luck next year. We'll talk to you all soon. At the very least, bowl game preview. If not, maybe a little bit before. If we don't talk to you before Christmas, Merry Christmas. Until next time, go Hokies.